The Vinyl Destination.
Good afternoon, guys. My name's Liam Rush.
I'm Mike Kenner.
My name's Johnny Brister.
And this is The Vinyl Destination. This is a brand new podcast where three mates choose an album, get together over Zoom for now, obviously, and discuss. So this week we have the 2004 album from Norah Jones, Feels Like Home. How you guys doing?
Yeah, good, mate.
Good.
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
We're going to mention Phil Mitchell again.
Always Phil Mitchell. Always.
So anyone that, basically everyone that can't see, if you're listening, Dion is wearing a Grant of Phil Mitchell t-shirt, and it's absolutely brilliant.
It's pretty amazing.
Spectacular. Spectacular t-shirt, I'm not going to lie.
Mm. And I'm eating a Fab, and it's
I was going to
fabulous.
ask what you're eating. It looks good. Little ice lolly.
Fab.
Yeah, treated myself to some Fabs the other day.
They are a
Nice.
great ice lolly. Good choice.
Well, they have everything, don't they? They have like the chocolate and sprinkles at the top.
Mm.
Then it goes to a mixture of like lolly and ice cream, and then it's just lolly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you know what else I used to love? Twisters. Remember those?
Oh yeah, messy though, very messy.
Yeah, very messy.
I was always a feast guy.
Yeah, with the chocolate, the solid chocolate in the middle.
Absolutely.
And, oh, so good.
They were the best.
The nutty chocolate, then the ice cream. Oh, it's great.
Do you know what I think is actually one of the best? I think Mars ice creams.
Mm.
They knock the actual chocolate bar out of the park.
I think I would agree, actually. I think I would agree.
Yeah, I like a Mars bar. I can't say, mind you, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but I do like a Mars bar. I'd
Mate,
never
deep
really go
fry
for
it.
the ice
And
cream.
deep fry it, that's the way to go.
yeah.
Man, I used to work in a fish and chip shop
Oh,
years
yeah.
and years ago. It's like one of the first jobs I ever had.
Yeah.
And the amount of things we used to do batter-wise,
Deep fry
we just
everything.
experiment.
Yeah.
Oh, man. We used to make the most insane burgers.
Mm.
Getting
It's,
up to something fishy, I reckon, mate.
Mate, that joke was a load of bollocks, I tell you, honestly.
Oh, no.
Oh, there's a time and place for that, mate. I'm going to batter you in a minute.
For God's sake.
Oh. Hey, mate.
I've got to jump in and say it's a sad day. Tony Allen has died.
Tony Allen?
An absolutely legendary drummer. He essentially invented Afrobeat. He played for Fela Kuti, the Africa 70. He's just, he's a big name in the drumming world. And yeah, he died today.
Oh, described by Brian Eno as, quote, perhaps the greatest drummer who has ever lived. Wow. That's a big old compliment, isn't it?
It's, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what have you guys been up to this week, besides being in isolation still, of course?
Practice, a lot of practice. I turned my room into a workshop. I essentially, I've got 3 basses that I tend to use all the time, and I just gave them a full setup. There's a jazz bass that I barely play anymore, but it was the first bass I ever got in my second year at uni, and it needed some TLC. It's a lovely bass, it plays lovely, but it's I do most of my stuff on P bass now, like most of what I'm doing, but obviously being in lockdown, I'm just playing everything and doing a lot of recording from home, and there are some stuff that I want to use the jazz and
Mate, Yero would be proud of you. Yero, for anyone who doesn't know, Yero, excellent, amazing tech on our last tour. He might be listening to these as well. We'll tell him to check these out. Yeah, amazing tech in Finland. He can do it all. He set up Mike's bass and he set up Johnny's drums and did a bunch of stuff with my guitars, and he's a legend.
Yeah.
Great drummer within his own right as well.
Exactly.
He plays as well, and an absolute gem to hang out with.
Yeah, lovely guy.
Yeah, he was
Lovely guy.
legend, absolute legend. He was.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to mention Yere, then we need to. Who else are we going to introduce? Surely the infamous driver.
Oh, mate, Harry Hazza.
Hazza.
Hazza is the biggest legend ever. Man of few words, but the few words that he does speak are fantastic.
Yeah, they're just absolute gems. And you know what? The ultimate pro.
Yeah.
You know, if you talk about being that professional musician or another profession is, it was just perfect, wasn't it? You couldn't fault him. And I think there's something to be said about even someone who's not in your field, you can learn a lot from people like that.
Oh, mate, big time. Well, we always said, like, he'd be without question, every day at the van, 5 minutes, 10 minutes early. You'd look out the window and he'd be there 15 minutes before you were meant to be down in the lobby. And
fueled up and ready to go. Like, the whole tour, we never did one fuel stop.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible.
Wasn't necessary. He'd done it all before.
Yeah. And we had that running joke, didn't we? That he was just always just everywhere. Like, you'd go in the lift in the hotel and he'd already be in there. But you'd just seen him like out the front, like 5 minutes before that. It's just crazy. He was all over the place.
Yeah, that was a really great team, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a good tour. I really enjoyed that tour.
Now to think that's the last gig that we did before all of this stuff. As we said last week, 6 weeks ago now. So.
I was booked in to do one. The next one after coming back was the Cavern, which I love doing, and it was the whole lockdown thing, or the pubs being closed, was literally the day before. Yeah. So that would have been the last gig for me, but
I do remember
they literally shut it all down the day before.
Yeah.
It happened, so.
We were going through that though, weren't we? On the bus, we were talking about we think when that gig got cancelled in Finland, and we were saying, we think we'd be okay at home. We were like, we think weddings will still be cool, and also, there was still no word about theatres and stuff like that. So it was kind of like there, and then it all started dropping off, and slowly.
As soon as we arrived.
As soon as we
got back to the UK, that was it. That was all she wrote.
The soil. Yeah, I know. But that's good. What about you, Johnny? What have you been up to this week?
Very similar practice. Listen to lots of records. If anything, I feel like I did this thing a couple of weeks ago where I was like, right, I'm going to try and phone, maybe not even 2 weeks ago, 10 days. And I was like, I'm going to try and phone a friend a day, because I'd kind of, not intentionally, but I'd spent the first 4 or 5 weeks just like practicing really on my own. And like, I'm quite, I live with 3 other friends, musicians, so I'm quite content. So I started I was penning in these like, hey, do you fancy catch up? And after about 4 days, I was so drained because these conversations were like 2-3 hours long, which of course, love catching up with friends. But then I'd go, wow, I've achieved nothing today. And actually maybe one of the days a bit intense. So, so I've actually spent the last couple of days, which is always been something I try and do. So I put my phone to the side and just kind of leave it there, because not even just on a productive level, it can be quite draining, I think, a phone, because it's so easy to get stuck on it.
Oh my God.
So and I've always been very cautious with that, especially now in lockdown. Like if you're not careful, you could sit there for hours and sort of do this circle of nothing. So I'm trying to be a bit better with that. But no, lots of practice as always, and a couple of quizzes as always.
Very nice. Mate, I'll tell you what, the eggheads are going to be in for it when this is all over, and the chasers. I'm telling you, they are. All the Zoom quizzes that people are doing, the knowledge is going to be through the roof. So.
Yeah, I actually won my first one last night, and out of all the 6 weeks, I must be averaging about 2 a week, and I finally won my first one.
Yes.
Admittedly, It was against 2 of my mates from Somerset, and not the best competition. But I actually did get 35 out of 50, which is, I'm terrible at quizzes. I don't know. I just, when the questions just suit you, I just have one of those nights. What about yourself? Obviously, doing some recording stuff with the choir. And stuff
been doing a lot of recording bits and just staying on the production wagon, really. Just trying to just be active on my computer, just revisiting old bits that I've written and writing new stuff, and dug out an old guitar, actually. Funny you talk about tech stuff, Mike. This is my old parts caster. and the strings on it are literally a few years old, but it's tuned half a step down. But do you know when I almost don't want to change the strings because it sounds and feels so good, and I'm a bit worried. I'm like,
I know that feeling. I know that feeling. Like
I've got something like that, but this guitar just sounds wicked, and
I've got this jazz bass that I was talking about. I've completely redone it, so set up from the ground up. Did the truss rod and action and intonation, pickup heights, the lot. Just really essentially redid the bass. It feels brand new now. The only thing I haven't done is change the strings because they're really old. I don't even know what strings are on there.
You can get away with not changing the strings on the bass because the way they go around the thing, isn't it? The pole piece, like
But do you take them off and do your kind of refurb on it and put them back on?
Or... No, I didn't. No, I left them on really. I would have taken them off to give it a bit more of a clean, which I might do soon anyway, because the fretboard's got just a bit of, it's been played. It's seen some shit, this bass.
Can you take strings off and put them back on again?
Yeah, of course you can.
Well, no, because I find with drum heads, is because you're putting a lot of tension on them and obviously they're stretching down. For me, once you take a head off, it's never the same going back on, which is why I ask. So, I find that anyway. But obviously, I
tend to switch because I've got the 1P bass that I play, and I usually play it with flats on, as you know. But for recording, that I've been doing bits of recording here at home. Sometimes you need a P bass with round wounds on it. So I actually have a set of round wounds and flats, and I switch them for different things.
On the same bass? Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the flats will last a long time because they're really good, and flat wounds are just kind of a dead sort of sound anyway. But the rounds, the more you play them, the more they don't last for very long. So I'll probably have to keep replacing the rounds. But at the moment they're still pretty bright. But I switch them. I take them off, put them back on. Depending on what projects I'm doing. And I think it would be the same for the jazz because I like that jazz. It sounds great right now because they're round wounds, but they're completely dead.
Right.
And it's got its own sort of flavour. But it will need to. I want that sort of bright jazz tone,
zinginess.
Yeah, exactly. Because it has this. The jazz bass has like a growl to it that it just sounds great when you're putting it down. It depends what you want to do with it, but I'll definitely be restringing it at some point, and then I'll get to the fingerboard as well. And I think it's a good skill to have for a musician. If you should know how to set your stuff up, and you should know what works for you, and that's a good thing to explore. We can spend a lot of time practicing music and actually just creating music and notes, but to also work on sound and setup and your equipment and knowing what you're doing with that is well important, really important,
big time. Same for drums, Johnny, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's not like setting up like you guys would talk about, but certainly something that popped out then was when you talk about a certain instrument makes you play a certain way. Now, obviously, you have a number of drums that you can add to your kit, which offers you a different amount of voices. But I also think that the different amount of drums makes you think in a different way. Mm-hmm. And you have these different, and then it becomes about you have to be musical in your choices and not feel that you have to play every one. And then you can go to a setup a bit more like a Roger Taylor when he's got sort of rototoms and that, and it's using them in a way that works for music, which I think he does really well. And same as Don Henley with the Eagles, like he used them really well. But I've been getting really into like more of a 5 or 6 piece setup with like 2 up, 2 down. But I had, obviously, you guys remember when all the gear was nicked last year. In my hardware box, I had all my Yamaha kit hardware in that box, as well as my Tama kit, because obviously I was on the playing the Tama kit. So I've got this beautiful Yamaha drum kit, which is definitely a vibe musically I want to play a bit more, because it's got more options and more voices, but it's got no hardware whatsoever.
Yeah.
So although not doing it up, I've been thinking about let's start thinking about what I can pick up second hand, keeping it not too expensive, but also get it up and running again. But yeah, exactly. A certain kit, a lot of studio stuff I do, I would say 90% of it has always been on my 60s Ludwig kit, and it has a particular sound, but also makes you play a certain way. The drums are a bit fuddier, so your sticks almost get, I don't want to say get stuck into it, but there's not so much response as I would like on my Yamaha. Like Mike's saying, it's having those options of gear. Firstly, makes you think a different way, makes you play a different way, makes you sound a different way, and I think it depends on what you're trying to get out of it, but having those options is massively important in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Not only that, but it's good to keep mixing things up as well a little bit. Like I said before, I've been doing so much on that P bass that's where my home is now. When I think musically, I'm always thinking about the sound that I have in my head, or that I envisage when I'm composing or when I'm putting something down, is that P bass sound that I create. Yeah. But picking up this jazz and giving it a full setup, playing now, switching onto the bridge pickup, which is obviously gives it that kind of Jacko sort of nasally tone, which because it's right at the end of the string. I found that I wasn't as at home on it anymore, because I was so used to playing that P bass that actually playing with a different string tension was a little tricky for me, and it took me a little while to get back into it. So it's knowing, like Johnny said, it makes you play differently, but it's also an important thing to make sure that you are continuously sort of changing and making sure that you can play on these different things, because it was quite surprising to me. I've always been very comfortable on that jazz, but because I hadn't played it for a while, picking it up and just something silly like that, like just switching on to the neck pickup, bridge pickup, and just finding that a bit, like, it just felt a bit alien to me.
I think there is
how it plays back, doesn't it? How you react.
Exactly.
Sound,
Exactly. I try not. I'm guilty. I try not to like change guitars that I'm playing from day to day like too much, because I do find it does you don't feel as kind of fluent. Do you know what I mean? If I sit down and play the same guitar for like days on end, that starts to feel really, really good. Whereas if you feel like you're kind of flitting between different, if one day you pick one up and the other day is a different one, it's kind of, maybe that's just an excuse for, but it feels.
No, I think you're right.
No, I think there's definitely different. I think you're right as well, Dion, because I mean, if I was to get called on a gig now where the music was particularly challenging, or I really needed to bring my A game, I'm bringing that P bass, and that's because I am just at home on that bass, and it's because I play it every day. But I like I was saying, it's just having that sort of diversity as well, being able to nail it if you needed to use something else or something different.
For sure.
So I totally agree with what you're saying.
I think it's as well, right now we're in a situation where we're practicing, and you guys in particular, because I've got this little practice setup, so it's a bit different for me as a drummer. But you guys can go, today I fancy this or fancy that, so it's a bit harder not to go down that route. Whereas when we're working, for me, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, the choices are made by what the gig, studio session, show is,
100%.
So so I instantly, when I get a call for something, I know within seconds what kit I'm using. Well, providing I know what the music is like, I'll have a listen, and straight away I know where my head's going, and it gets you into that headspace. Whereas right now we're in that situation, guitarists in particular go, I can do a bit of this, but I agree. You get to know your instrument massively.
Absolutely, becomes your best mate. An extension of your body,
Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely does.
Talking of gear, I was going to say, unless you got something to add on that, Mike, I was going to say I was really interested in this album, how much they use these different amounts of instruments and how well they're used.
Totally. Yeah, should we delve into the album a bit then? Should we?
Yeah, let's do it.
take it away. So, this is reason I chose this one is because I remember at the time, obviously we all know, you know, of listened to Norah Jones a fair bit, and she's had her hits in the charts and stuff. But I didn't really. This kind of went under the radar a bit for me at the time. This album, I didn't really think that much about it. But then again, I was only like 13, so my tastes were like in like Green Day and stuff like that. You know, it's only a bit later on that I started to really appreciate it. And yeah, Johnny, what you mentioned about it being so diverse kind of instrumentally is what one of the things that I really, really like about it. I think there's some really nice, really, really beautiful guitar work on it. That's another thing that catches my eye quite a bit.
I think that would be. I would say that was probably the strongest part of the record for me was the guitar work.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Some really lovely tones, really nice tones and parts that just, you know. And I know we always talk about production and stuff, but I really, really like the production on this album because it's just so. I actually there's a really, really good quote that I saw from the producer, who's the guy that worked with her on the first album as well. Mardin was his name. Arif Mardin, that was it. And he said, these new songs have been a wonderful journey. The album is not about synthesizers or computers. It's about Norah being au natural. She doesn't need pitch correction. She's always in tune and her voice always touches you. Millions of people around the world feel the same way. I was like, that kind of sums it up. She has that sort of voice, doesn't she?
Should we finish there?
That's it. That settles it, yeah.
I would agree because I know as we go through the album, it's certainly, in my opinion, not her strongest material all the way through. But I agree that the use of different instruments. I love a whirly that crops up. There's a couple of guitar solos that we will get into that were amazing. And then the different use of not just playing a drum kit the whole way through. So there was lots of different things like that for me. And like you, this, in all honesty, I'd never listened to this whole album the whole way through until this week when we decided to do it. And I worked out that I was 17 when this came out. So, and especially for you being 13, it would have been a very mature choice if you were listening to this, I think.
For sure.
But I did have Come Away With Me in the house a lot with my mum, but not this album. This is this apart from a few tracks I knew because I checked out a live show of hers. I wasn't aware of the whole album, so that was a new listening experience for me. Actually.
Yeah, it was for me as well. Actually, I obviously knew who Norah Jones was at the time, but was never really into it. I was definitely more into other music at the time. And I'd never heard this album before. In fact, I hadn't heard anything on this album until I picked it up for this really. I hadn't. I can't say I'm a huge Norah Jones fan.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. Something's just missing for me, you know. And I found that with this album. Obviously, there's a lot of great talking points, which we will get to, and some of the music is absolutely beautiful. But you know, I did find it just feels like it's not it just didn't grab me.
Yeah,
you know,
I would fully agree there, 100%. It's not like, I wouldn't consider it to be a kind of a classic album, you know, by any means. But I think there's some really nice things, as we've mentioned, to note. And I mean, the success at the time, I believe it got to number one in like loads of countries. UK album number one, US, you had like France, Germany, Canada, all of these places it hit number one.
Oh, it did amazingly commercially. Really,
and I think
really
it was up for the Grammy as well. Sunrise won the Grammy for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance.
What I wanted to add to you sorry, Mike, you saying that is I think it's worth noting, especially in this era that we're not in now, but it was only 2 years ago that Come Away With Me was released.
Exactly.
It was so huge that I think that was a period of time that people, because the album was so good, but I think people would have taken a punt and got this record. So I do wonder, I'm not disputing its success, but whether some of that success is, I love Norah Jones in that album, I've got to check this out. And I think it was a different time then. Like, people bought records more than
sure. Also, don't get me wrong, this is a lovely album and it sets a mood. It's the whole album has a mood to it, which I think is perfect for this lovely weather. Not actually it's raining.
Yeah, where are you
now? But the weeks that we've had recently, it's been really nice to sit in the sunshine and listen to this, because it's definitely, there's some beautiful music in there, and it does set a mood and a vibe.
Yeah.
But I do agree 100%. With what you're saying, Johnny. Like 2004 as a year, to be fair, like as far as I'm concerned, it's a bit of a nothing year. Like, there's some huge albums that came out. There are some huge albums, but after coming away from what last week we were talking about, 1977, and just the sheer mass of incredible music that was coming out at this time. This 2004 was a bit of a nothing year. Now, there's a lot of debuts that came out. And
I just stop you there for 2 secs, because it's so weird that you say that, because I did a little bit of research as well, and I'm interested to see if you come to the same conclusion that I did about this. But I had exactly the same process. I thought, it's not really, it's cool, there's some good albums, but nothing that really goes, wow,
No. The biggest...
Sorry, go ahead.
The albums I would say for me that were big ones, or that are big ones for me, or ones that I still remember fondly now, things like Confessions by Usher. You've got Kanye's first record, which
College Dropout.
Is that College Dropout? Great record.
Yeah. You got Encore, Eminem. You got R&G by Snoop Dogg. You've got the Jay-Z and Linkin Park mashup.
Yeah.
That was massive at the time. John Legend's Get Lifted.
Yeah, nice.
Which is a big one as well. Musicology by Prince, I remember that. Coming up.
He gave that out at shows, didn't he? I think that was for like a tour or something that he was doing. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So there are, obviously for hip hop, it's a massive year. You can see Rule by Ja Rule came out as well.
Do you know what's really interesting about this is, and I hadn't noticed until you said these albums, is that period of my life, I was listening to Eminem Encore, I was listening to Ja Rule and this hip hop thing, and it shows, because I mean, you would have been a similar age to me, Mike, a couple of years older, I think. So I was 17, and I now you say these albums, like, oh, of course I remember that, and it was maybe the mates I was hanging out with, but it's interesting to think, was that because that was what was big at the time? Or I imagine that's why I got into hip hop a little bit.
Yeah, and also because there was very little else going on. I'm just going to point out, so there were so many debut records, right? So I'm just going to go through the list. So you got Scissor Sisters, which I guess that's a good record.
Yeah, the self-titled one. Yeah.
So you got the Cribs, Franz Ferdinand. You got Keane. Yeah, exactly. The Zootons. See, like loads of things, loads of artists debuted, but I'm not too fussed, to be honest. The Cribs, Franz Ferdinand, all good bands in their own right, but not.
I think Kasabian as well. Kasabian's self-titled, and you see, it was a big year for that kind of indie.
It seemed to be like it was definitely
Razorlight as well. Sorry, Razorlight's. What album was it? The big Up All Night. Their kind of big one as well. So that whole British indie scene was quite.
But that's probably it, isn't it? We're almost going. We mentioned about 70s, and you talk about those albums we mentioned that were worldwide. Eminem and those kind of things were worldwide. But I imagine this indie rock thing was much more British and English, right? It was much more, it stayed in Britain. I don't know, but when you point those things out, it instantly took me back. But also, I didn't really get into that indie rock thing probably ever. Really, but it definitely it appears to me, and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you guys know, but it's almost, as I was saying, that the Eminem thing is a worldwide thing, and the indie rock thing, when you talk about Kasabian and Razorlight, feels a bit more British.
For sure, yeah, for sure. There was a couple of other actual honourable mentions of albums. There was Avril Lavigne, Under My Skin, classic pop.
Was that her first one?
I think it might have been her first one. This was another one.
It's a huge record.
Yeah. Slipknot Volume 3, Subliminal Verses. I remember that at high school. Loved that. 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance.
That's a great album.
JoJo as well, self-titled. And then there was How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb by U2. Love Angel Music record. Baby, Gwen Stefani.
No.
A few really good ones. But I know what you mean. None of them, there's like a few distinct, there's a few pop albums. There's also Natasha Bedingfield Unwritten. There's some good pop stuff. There's the indie explosion, there's really good hip hop stuff. But it's interesting how there's not anywhere near as much like diversity as when you're looking at like the 70s. I mean, it makes sense.
You also had American Idiot, which came out this year,
how could I forget that?
That was absolutely huge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you also had the Rasmus.
Yeah. Joss Stone, by the way, Mind, Body and Soul by Joss Stone. That's a good album from that year.
Absolutely.
And also, honourable mention, Ronan Keating, 10 Years of Hits. It got to number 1. It got to number 1 in the UK. His greatest.
Do you know, I had a quiz the other night, and my uncle did a lyrics round, and the only one I didn't get was Roller Coaster's lyrics.
I mean,
how
is that possible, mate? I don't believe.
Because he was like, you really got your Italian a spin, and I was like, I recognise this. What is it? And when he told me, he also, funny enough, at the same era. So I was in a pop punk band, very Blink-182 New Found Glory vibes, which takes me back to this era of like my 17 to 19 was our big time that we were playing a lot. But he was like, do you know, can you name the band with the names? And he said all our names. And he said, Jonathan, Peter, Nicholas and Timothy. Well, we never called ourselves the full names. Didn't get it in the quiz. He was like, Johnny, that was the band you were in. So yeah, at this period of time, so I wasn't really listening to Norah Jones. I was in a pop punk band called Not Your Hero, and so I was very focused. I would have heard obviously Avril Lavigne's and American Idiot, but I didn't get into that British invasion of the indie rock really.
No,
I think this was the year I actually started playing electric guitar as well. So American Idiot was massive. I remember doing like probably the first ever gig that I ever did in high school. It was just called The Rock Concert, and we just did a bunch of covers off of American Idiot. Just played loads of it.
Did you start on acoustic or classical then?
Classical, yeah, for a few years.
Is that your second fab, Johnny?
Yeah.
Hey, you were going through them today.
Well, basically, I'm going to the shop today to do my food shop. I've not done it in 10 days, so I'm ready for stuff. And there was like one fab left. I was like, well, that'd be a shame to leave it on its own, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
So,
it's like me with Baby Bells. I have to eat the whole packet if I have.
We did that on our way to rehearsals to Mirror Fury. We stopped off for a snack. A whole bag of Baby Bells.
Yeah. Baby Bells, I don't get Baby Bells. They're just a bit of a nothing snack, aren't they? They don't really have any flavour.
They're great. I also just love cheese. I know it's not really, if we're going sort of proper cheese, the Baby Bell's not really it, but I do love cheese.
I love cheese as well.
Good. It's agreed. We all like cheese.
We all like cheese.
But we don't all like 2004 very much.
Yeah.
No. So
I've got to say that there aren't really any albums here that came out that year that have stood the test of time for me. You know, there's a couple. I have to say, honourable mention. There's a band called Ryla Kiley, which you probably wouldn't have heard of, but I was so into this album in this time called More Adventurous, and it's just really worth a listen. It's just a brilliant album, a brilliant band. Jenny Lewis is an amazing singer, and if you like, it got some great guitar work in it and stuff as well. It's really one that's kind of gone under the radar. I think in the States they were bigger, but they were just a fantastic band.
Yeah. So I found a list actually of this year of all of the albums that were number one, and I mean a lot of them were ones that we've already mentioned. Let me just grab the list up. But one thing that I found interesting was that part of this list says, you know, the weeks that these albums spent at number one. And the vast majority of all of these albums only spent 1 week at number one. And if you look now, albums can spend like 5-6 weeks, I think. I mean, I don't really follow the charts that much.
But you go back to the 70s and the albums were lasting 15 or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Like they could spend the longest one was 3 weeks, and that was Call Off the Search by Katie Melua. But that was at the start of 04, so it must have been released in 03.
Wow. There's an album you guys have missed that I'm a little shocked in, and it's probably one of the biggest records in my childhood.
Yeah.
Released in 2004, which was Blink-182's self-titled album.
Really? Was that 04?
Was that 2004?
I just Googled it because I was like, in 2004, I was so into my pop punk. I remember, also, I must have seen Blink at Wembley that year. Then they went on a hiatus.
I saw them there at Wembley.
When Travis came out in the middle and he does a drum solo.
I was there when Robert Smith of The Cure came and joined them on stage, which was one night of the two.
Yes. Yeah, I forget actually.
That was amazing because I was a huge Cure fan, and I remember that being like.
They used to cover. Was it Meet the Barkers? Meet the Barkers was obviously that MTV show with Travis, and I think the track that Blink recorded for it was a Cure song. I think I forget what it was, but yeah, that album is one of the biggest. I mean, obviously, I got to like Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and Enema State, but 2004 that was the biggest album for me that year at that period of time.
I'd say, do you know what? 2004, that was probably for me as well. I loved that record. I thought that was
brilliant.
Really cool.
You know, especially for me, like a huge Travis fan I was as a kid, and his creativeness on the kit, on something that people were just streaming through these 3 or 4 chords, like, bah, 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 you know, and Travis was so creative. So that was the album of the year for me.
So what really was it about 2004 that's unremarkable? Is it the benefit of hindsight that we're now looking back and saying nothing? What you said, Mike, really kind of, I guess, sums it up, that it hasn't really stood the test of time. American Idiot's probably the biggest one for me out of that year.
Would you go back and listen to that now?
I probably would, but not. My tastes have changed, so I still appreciate that album, but I wouldn't really put it on. And yeah,
there's also a great concept album. Like they obviously I can't say it was a great theatre show, but they did the American Idiot Theatre Show. Like it was, I think, in terms of like you talk about big concept albums. Obviously, you talk about Dark Side of the Moon and albums like that, but American Idiot did have a really cool concept to it.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I would listen to it is because a lad I teach, he really likes Green Day, and he started picking some songs off of that album. But that being said, no, I'd be very unlikely for me to stick that album on. Yeah.
It's fun, and this is the thing. It's like there are albums that you would still listen to now, you know, that you had at your childhood that have stood the test of time, and they age well. And I think a lot of this music at the time, you know, all the Franz Ferdinands and Keens of the world, I don't think their music, you know, obviously they're big for a week and, you know, number one for a week. I don't think that music's, I'm being really, I'm generalizing really heavily here, but, you know, I don't think a lot of this music is really great enough to warrant going back to and revisiting now.
There'd be a couple of singles, I imagine, from
absolutely
the likes of Keane that would. I'm not a Keane fan, and I don't know their material. I know a few of their hits, but Dion, did we do a Keane song quite recently for the choir?
Somewhere Only We Know, was it?
Yeah. Which is like, I have to say, it's a great pop song. You know, so maybe a few singles, but I also, what I would say to what you're asking, Dion, is that period of time, I definitely was very one-track minded to what I listened to.
100%, me too. Yeah.
So going back to those albums, like I talk about that Blink-182 album, and I think it was released in June. It also says November. I've not actually opened it properly, so it might be the case of one was released in America and then a later released in England or something. But I would have had that on repeat because that was my, I guess, obsession, which kept me playing drums, though, because I had an obsession with it. So my one-track mind probably kept me away from really understanding that year, like now, I guess.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Also, just remembered A Grand Don't Come for Free by The Streets came out in that year. That was a
Did it?
Do you know what that is? That is an album I would I listen. I didn't
100%.
listen to that too long ago. I love that. I love
great album. And Velvet Revolver Contraband. That was a good album. Slash and Scott Weiland.
Yeah, not a huge fan myself personally, but
again, it was of its time. I wouldn't really go back now. And
that was the one that had their the one single that they
Slither.
had.
Big had Slither on it.
Slither, that's it. That was on Scuzz and Krang constantly.
That's right.
I can still recall that video.
So to think like, I guess where Norah Jones would have fitted into all this sort of, she was obviously producing much more kind of like, I don't want to use the words mature music, but for the age that I was at the time, comparatively what I was listening to this album that we're talking about now, it is definitely more mature. The sound is more mature, isn't it? It's much more mature. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah.
Do you think? I don't know, because it sounds like it's saying the other music's immature, which it's not. Like it's.
Well, but I would say that some of that pop punk stuff is a little immature, though, isn't it?
I guess, yeah. It's probably because we associate it with that part of our life.
Absolutely, 100%. And maybe do you know what? Maybe if we were older, we'd be having a completely different conversation about 2004 because we might be like, there's loads of fantastic albums that came out, but maybe the reason we're talking about these are the ones we remember. These were the ones that were on our radar at that time. So. Yeah. But I mean, looking through that list, I found it extremely underwhelming. So I don't know. Who knows? But
I think we're in agreement.
It's definitely not up there in one of the best years for music of all time. That's for sure.
Should we talk a bit about the production on this album? So I believe I read that they obviously toured. She has quite or had, I guess, at this time, quite a tight knit band, and I think they must have toured the first album. And
she was with the bass player, wasn't she, with Lee Alexander?
Yeah, that's right.
They were together, and he was a songwriter as well, and he actually wrote a good few of the songs with her on this record.
Exactly.
And he was also a producer, and so he studied at Berklee, and he wrote 17 songs on those first 3 albums, so he was a pretty heavy contributor. Apparently they still live together now or something. They're not together anymore, but I think they still live together or something. That they still work together. They still have that working relationship.
Fair enough.
That's interesting. Yeah, I knew he had a big hand on Come Away With Me because I'm quite a fan of that album, and that's when I read up a little bit about their relationship, and they're not together. Well, I don't know about now, and I mean, I don't know her later albums, so I don't know how much involvement he's had. But that'd be interesting if they're still working together, because that's a tricky environment. I mean, you get some gems like Rumours, which was obviously had some bit of a whirlwind inside the band itself. So, but it must be a very tricky environment to work in.
Absolutely, I always find that an impressive situation when I toured last year with Rodrigo and Gabriella, which were like Dion, you probably know them. They're like an acoustic,
amazing
acoustic duo that are like really heavily rock inspired, but also and metal inspired. But they're like this acoustic duo with a lot of Latin vibe going on. So they kind of do Latin acoustic versions of like.
Because they're from Mexico, aren't they?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, but they're not together anymore, and they obviously were once upon a time, but they haven't been together for a while, and they still have a working relationship. They're touring all the time together. I've always find that very impressive to be able to go through that kind of thing and still maintain a working relationship.
Well, Mike, we play in a band that the couple aren't together anymore. The blues band. And they make it work, and they have such a connection musically, and I love playing in that band. But they're not a couple anymore, and that I mean, they've also been a band since I think it's 87, which was when I was born, which is amazing in itself. So I mean, that's the funny thing, that we're in that environment. You don't necessarily notice it, So you talk about, but it is amazing when people still work together, and you definitely assume anyway that their absolute love for the arts or the art that they're creating is the bigger picture for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The art overrides the personal quarrels, which is...
The art overrides the heart.
There you go. Nice profound statement there. I like that.
That's one for Instagram.
That's fueled by 2 fab lollies, that is.
Yeah, that is fueled by 2 fab lollies. Imagine I had a third. Jeez.
I'm really glad he hasn't got that third fab.
So whoever's listening to this podcast. I definitely must add about this this album, and it's something that's really intrigued me from nearly all the albums we've listened to, and I know we've only done 5 or 6 now, or whatever it is, 4 or 5. Every album, maybe apart from Asia, because I think it's a very different record, has started with such a strong opener. So you had like Hotel California and its opening. Remind me what else we've done. It's slipped my mind. Songs About Jane. Is it Harder to Breathe? I think it was.
Yeah.
Phil Collins.
Phil Collins.
Value
in the Air Tonight.
In the Air Tonight. Yeah.
So this opens with Sunrise, which was also her first single release. So she released 3 singles, which are actually the first 3 songs on the album. And when I first put this on, so Dion, you obviously picked this record last Friday when we finished our recording of Asia. And I put it on in the garden, and I was like, wow, this album might be better than Come Away With Me. Like, it started so strong. And then we will get into it more, but it lost me a little bit after that. It was almost like it was just... everything was thrown out at the start, and whether that was intentional or not. But yeah, the interesting thing for me is it a coincidence, or is there a reason that these albums that we're talking about all have such big hits as number 1 track?
I think it's an important part of enticing someone to listen to the rest of the album, isn't it? Like, if you put your worst track as the first, it's like opening a gig. You don't open the gig with like your worst song, do you? You don't always open
your best one either, though.
No, you don't. But
most popular, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, but there's a saying that goes around that people always remember the first and last tune that you do, and I think that's important. It's always important to go out. I'm thinking about a gig now, but it's always important to hit them with a good, strong opener, because otherwise, what's the point? And I think it's the same with an album. You need to start an album strong.
I think it may have been, was there maybe a sense of the kind of dreaded second album syndrome in there as well, where because Come Away With Me had been such a success, there's always that worry that the second album's never going to do as well. So maybe they made it a bit top heavy to kind of...
Well, especially as successful as Come Away With Me was.
Exactly.
But to go off what you were saying, Mike, and I agree with you, but with this album, it started so well for me. By the end of it, I was so underwhelmed that I'd almost forgotten how good the start was. So, I do agree with you, but I think in this instance, it didn't necessarily work in its favour for me as a listener.
I mean, her piano playing, I really enjoy her piano playing. She's got such a beautiful touch.
Yeah.
But she studied jazz piano, I think, at uni in like Texas. So, that was kind of her bag. It's just so... That's a standout thing for me, is her touch on piano as well is just beautiful throughout.
I would agree. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And something maybe I would find interesting to talk to you guys about is the hub of jazz music that ends up in New York, and obviously that comes from heritage and things like that. But isn't it amazing that even now it's held on to that, and whether that's because of certain jazz unis in the area, whether that's certain jazz venues. I've spent a lot of time in New York, so I've been to a lot of those places, but isn't it amazing that that's where that hub is? And obviously this was released on Blue Note Records, which is that jazz label. So I find that interesting. If you guys have anything to add about like that jazz, like if you're going to do jazz seriously, you go to New York.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be somewhere, like if you want to get into movies, you go to LA. There's a place for things, and New York is just that place. It's the jazz place. So I had a friend of mine that went to New York, and I thought he was a pretty phenomenal jazz player, and he came back 6 months later and just had been played out of they just lost all love for jazz, just completely tore a new butthole out there you know, the level of musicianship, you know, in jazz in New York is just terrifying.
Yeah. But I would say that can go one or two ways. It can really inspire, and you can really grow. Like, I think when you're around that kind of environment, yeah, it can have different effects on different people. But you know, I'm not heavily into my jazz, but I found New York City in general very inspiring. I definitely think it's got that feel, and I think London probably has that feel as well. I mean, it's hard for us to. I mean, you two brought up in London, weren't you? Whereas I moved 7 years ago. But London definitely has an excitement, but it's a very different feel to like New York or in LA. And I do find that very interesting about these places, because of course, if you're writing a jazz-esque record or has jazz elements, you're going to find the best jazz records in New York, which is, you know, I think she's from there, right?
Yeah, I think she was born there, then went to Texas, and then I think all of her albums, or most of them, have been recorded in New York.
Yeah, which would make sense. Yeah,
totally. Mm. But there's a wealth of venues there as well, isn't there, in New York, in the Village and stuff, like 55 Bar, Village Vanguard, all of these old spots. You know, like, you know, Mike Stern playing in 55 Bar like every week.
I saw Mike Stern in 55 Bar.
Yeah,
and it was phenomenal. It's a tiny little place, and I went with a friend of mine, and it was $10 to get in, and I love that. But I love that about any kind of small bar that you have a drink with your friends, and there's great music.
Yeah, that's what I love. I didn't actually go there when I went to LA, but I'm so regretful that I didn't. There's the Baked Potato in LA, which is like similar to the 55 Bar, but LA's version, and you get all the mega, you know, legendary session guys just go there and play. Like Mike Landau does gigs there. I'm sure Lukather's done a bunch there. Like, you know,
back in the day, I actually was listening to this podcast the other day, and used to get Vinny Caliucci, used to get Caro and Lukather play there again for like $10 or something.
Yeah.
And it's on the. I mean, I've not actually been there myself, but on the podcast, he talks about you go there and you can order a baked potato. And it's it's a tiny room, and you have a drink, and but it's just about great musicians, and apparently, like all the guys that go to uni around those areas, they go to watch these guys.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's a place in London for that? I mean, barring Ronnie's, which is obviously kind of a central hub for jamming and stuff. Is there any places that you find you can go to for like a tenner and go and watch amazing music?
Yeah, what's that place, Dion, in Chelsea Way?
Under the bridge?
Nope, I've not been there.
I know exactly the one you mean. I know the exact. I can't think of the name of it. It's on it's by the water in Chelsea. I can't remember.
Let's have a look.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know the one you mean, but I can't think what it is. But I mean, there's a lot of the Pizza Expresses. They do some pretty awesome gigs. And remember when we saw Adam Goldsmith in that pub in Highgate, Johnny?
Yeah, and just the pub.
Yeah.
I'm determined to find
it. Does happen, but I can't think of a particular venue is the one for it.
Yeah. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, you know, in LA and New York, and you have these famous places to go to.
Yeah.
You know, that is going to be fantastic. Whereas
I'll tell you what it is, 606 Club, Johnny. That's it.
Oh, the 606. Yeah.
I think that would be at one of our bars, and obviously you've got Ronnie's. And I think, as Dion's saying, there are you got to know about it, but sometimes you'll go to a little pub and you've got a nice killing band, like it was Adam Goldsmith, Steve Pearce, Guy Richmond on drums. Like, it was a great lineup. We just went into the pub for free and had a couple of beers and really enjoyed the band. We've got the Cavern, of course, Mike.
Yeah, you got Boaters in Kingston. It's one of those kind of places.
Yeah.
But then amazing. That's a Sunday, you know. That is it, you know. And the Cavern obviously has a very wide variety of different things. But you know, I don't know. I do find that you really have to look. You know, we've been there before, Johnny, where we've been hanging out a couple of nights and we've gone, let's go and see some music, and we just couldn't find any. Like, there just wasn't any really good stuff anywhere. You know,
or not knowing if it was good stuff. If we're talking names, if we're talking about specific names, it's a little bit tougher. But I would say 606 and Ronnie's is probably ours, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so,
606 is good, actually.
Yeah, it's got a cool vibe. I've only been a couple times, but I've seen some great music. Yeah.
I tell you what's a good one. It seems to be a good one for the circuit kind of touring. Is there's Nels Jazz and Blues in, I think it's Kensington Way maybe, but I know like people like Eric Gales and stuff have played there when he's done his UK tours.
Right, okay.
You get some good guys in there, but day to day, I'm not sure what sort of stuff they have in there. But
well, it kind of shows as well, like where maybe the music industry or venues are in England, London. You know, I think London is so incredibly expensive that it must cost a huge amount to run something like that. And it's really sad, actually, because I think maybe we'd be having a different conversation. You know, when I read my old autobiographies from like Mick Fleetwood and they talk about their blues scene in the 60s, I think we'd be having a very different conversation 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe it's just it adds to the shape of the industry when we talk about albums nowadays. You know, now, like albums out now, like I just think that's how much the industry has changed and is continuing to change. And then your concern is with what's going on now, where is it left at the end of this? But let's, on a more upbeat, let's think about something positive. Let's talk about Fabs. But to add to the opening track then, Sunrise, which I absolutely love. Interestingly, we were talking about the diverse instruments being used, and I really like the slit drum used on this by Andrew Borger. I'd heard of Andrew Borger because he played live with her on a live show I saw, which must have been, I think it was 2007, because it definitely had both albums of Feels at Home and Come Away With Me. I didn't know what slit drum was, so I did do a little bit of research for you guys, unless you guys know what slit drum is.
I don't.
No, it's a hollow percussion instrument, usually carved or constructed from bamboo. Most slit drums have one slit, though 2 or 3 slits can occur in the shape of an H. And I have to say, it was perfectly placed in this song. I didn't miss a kit. I think that's one thing I will add about this album, is even though they're obviously experimenting using different instruments, I do think it's all used incredibly well and not just for the sake of it. I think it really works.
Yeah. Nice textures and all that. I think for me, again, I've already spoken about her piano, how much I love that, and it just sounds really, really beautiful. But yeah, the guitar work as well, particularly track 2, What Am I to You? The guitar on that, you've got like the slide solo, and it's it's like that P90 pickup sound that's just my favorite. It's probably using like a Gibson or something, but I just love that sound. It's that kind of barky sort of like warmth like to it, and it just sounds really, really cool.
In fact, that's a good word to describe the album, is warm.
Yeah, it's very warm.
It's just a very warm sounding, like it is, isn't it? It's very soft and warm, and
What's your guys' favourite song on it?
Sunrise, probably, the first one.
Yeah. I had wrote Sunrise, but to just add to your guitar solo on What Am I to You, so it's that slide guitar, right?
Yeah.
Is what I love, and as you guys know, and I know you guys are as well, I'm a big Derek Trucks fan. And it's not just the fact that he sings with it, and like the guitar sings, it sounds amazing. I really like the fact that this is perfectly placed in between the vocals. It's, he does his solo and then he continues to add while she's singing, and it's like, I always notice Derek Trucks, never on top of it, it's just in between, beautifully placed. And that was something that stood up for me. And to add to that song, because I would probably agree with like Sunrise or Those Sweet Words or What I Am to You, they would be my favourites. But Levon Helm on drums, and I'm sure you guys know who Levon Helm is. He plays drums, and that's it, on this song. And I have to say how beautiful his pocket is, and so musical. Like he's a stunning drummer who actually has a stunning voice. And for anyone listening, if you don't know Levon Helm, I mean, unfortunately, he's not alive anymore. He died in 2012. He was 71, but he was in a band called The Band. But he used to play drums and sing, and he just he's a country player, but he just has this really unique individual pocket that's just, as soon as he played, I was like, I didn't know it was him at first, and I was like, wow, who's this? So he's the standout player. So I think on that note, I'm going to say what am I to you with the guitar slide, and Live on Helm is my favourite song.
I would agree. I think that's probably I think my second favourite would be Those Sweet Words. So really like the melody on that one. But I think What Am I to You edges it for sure.
I quite like the tune with Dolly Parton as well.
Yeah. It's sort of
the same.
Much more all-out country, isn't it, compared to the rest of it? Yeah.
In fact, controversially, when she starts singing, I'm like, there we go. I don't know.
You know it's her. Yeah.
But it's also, it's just got a bit more to it. I'm not saying that I hate this record at all, because it's a nice record, but it was a bit like, I'd get halfway and I'd be like, how many songs are left?
I did the same thing. And it's only like a 45-minute album. It's not even that. It's pretty normal, I guess.
Yeah.
I agree with the Dolly thing. Like, you know it's her, and that was actually nominated for Best Country Collaboration with Vocals, which it didn't win anything. But yeah, you know it's Dolly, and obviously that is so country, that song.
Yeah.
So it does make the album a bit like, is this like a bluesy, jazzy thing? Is it? And it has a couple country numbers in there. And it lacks a little identity for me, this album, actually. Those Sweet Words that you were saying really enjoyed, which I agree. The only info I found was saying Andrew Borger was playing the box. Now, I can only assume, and listening to it, the box means a cajon.
Yeah.
But I have to add, as not a huge fan of the cajon, especially as it's entered mainstream music more in more recent years. He plays it beautifully and perfect for the vibe, because obviously there's, not that I've studied a cajon and don't claim to be great at cajon, but it stands out that he's playing it really well, and it really suits the vibe.
I think cajon is it's one of those instruments you can definitely learn to play cajon like a cajon, and it's totally different. These great percussionists, you can really make a cajon like sound amazing, whereas usually I'm more accustomed to them turning up as like a substitute for a kit, and it'll be someone just banging out a bass and snare drum sound on it, and it's and I agree with Johnny. I'm not a fan of the cajon for that reason, probably.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever met a drummer who is a fan of cajon. Genuinely haven't. Yeah.
It's one of those things that I'm assuming as a drummer you get asked if you can do it, and you go, yeah, okay, go on, give me the box.
Yeah.
It's another string to the bow, isn't it? There's a lot of acoustic gigs flying around that people jump on with a cajon.
Well, you got to remember as well, like, what I will add to that is that you could end up doing, like saying, doing a little acoustic set, and if someone is playing, let's say, a pop song that a cajon was never used on, and they're still just playing it the same way, it's very hard to create that vibe on a cajon if no one else is creating that vibe. Whereas Those Sweet Words is a perfect example that was the best suited instrument percussion-wise.
Absolutely.
So it's a different thing when you go, right, okay, we need to try and do this cover of this huge pop song on a cajon. Is a different approach to, that's just it. Like I said, Andrew Borger, I think, doing a great job on they said call it the box. I'm assuming the box is the cajon. It sounds like one.
I guess so. It definitely sounds like one. Yeah. It's got that woodiness. Yeah, I think so. But I agree with you, Dion. I really love that. So the first three songs for me are my favourites, and then you're going to lose me a little bit from them, if I'm honest. But, I definitely agree with you guys that it does. As it sort of approaches that halfway point, you do find yourself, I found myself waning a little bit. I was still liking it, but it was just kind of like, I mean, then again, I do love the last track as well. Not quite as much as the first three, but I do really enjoy the last one with just her and the piano. But there's nothing that really grabs you. It sort of sags a bit in the middle, doesn't it, the album, I think?
Yeah. It does. And that's not to say, I mean, the instrumentation on this is amazing. I think we have said it's like things have been chosen. These songs have been so wonderfully crafted. I think like the instruments have been chosen for their voice and for each song. And Lee Alexander plays bass, like plays lovely bass on this. It's upright bass for most of this. Although I think it's upright bass for all of it. According to Wikipedia, it says in the morning he plays acoustic bass and electric bass on it. I can't hear that in there. I've had a listen. It just sounds like upright throughout for me.
I would agree. Yeah, I thought
maybe I'm not. Maybe I've missed it, but he plays. It's so nice. Everything's just perfectly accompanying the vocal.
Yeah. And there's also, we've already spoken about electric guitar, but there's some really, really nice acoustic guitar moments, both fingerstyle and kind of lead. What's the tune with the sort of like bluegrassy sort of?
I don't even know much about the guitarist Adam R. Levy Dion.
I believe he's like a. Oh, hang on, he's her main guitarist, isn't he? I think he's a New York jazz guy, as far as I know. And he mostly has made his career, from what I can see, having spent a lot of time in Norah Jones's band. Whether he's still there now, I'm not sure, but I did read that he's now, for the past 5 years, he's the chair of guitar performance at Los Angeles College of Music. So
right.
He's obviously using that experience, touring and recording and stuff, to now do the kind of uni lecturer kind of job, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that guitar solo in Be Here to Love Me, track 6. That was the standout guitar section for me. I mean, as much as I really enjoyed the slide as well, as I mentioned earlier, it just had so much feel and space. It was just, really, really loved his playing. And his playing then popped up again. I noted it down. Where have I put it? It's on Toes. Mm-hmm. Again, love that guitar solo. So I really, really loved his playing.
Yeah. I also actually forgot to mention, I read that he played, I'm not sure exactly what song or what part, but on Wolfpack's album 4 years ago, The Beautiful Game, he featured on it.
Oh, no way. I love that album.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourites, man.
Yeah, I need to find out exactly what, obviously guitar, but I don't know on what tune. I'll look into that.
So yeah, I mean, as we get through the album, you definitely started losing me at this point. It's funny because when I listen to these albums, often in the morning of we do this, I then go through for one last listen and I kind of write down anything I feel with it, and it's more about what I'm hearing, what I enjoy hearing, and I've written, not mad about this song, I like this song, whereas it started with love this song. And I remember when us three last Friday, just as you chose this album, I think we all sat down. It was a beautiful day. I remember sat in the garden and I stuck this album on, and we were texting each other for the first few songs, going, man, this is amazing, all this. And then we just stopped texting each other. and I assume we all kind of got a little lost there at the same time.
I think what Mike said really sums it up. It's warm and it's pleasant, but it's not really grab you by the scruff of the neck and be like, this is an album you must, this will stay with you. It's not really got that quality.
I just don't. It doesn't touch me. Like at no point is there. Obviously, she sings with soul, and she's a great singer and great songwriter. These are lovely songs, but at no point do I feel attached to it in any way. And like I said, when Dolly Parton turns up, it's like Dolly Parton's Dolly Parton, and it's funny, but actually when she starts singing, you're like, there you go. Like she sings, I don't know, there's something about sonically, I don't know, it grips me more. And if I'm going to listen to a nice chilled country or jazz influenced country kind of record, like an adult contemporary thing like this is, there's definitely other singers that definitely grip me more than Norah Jones, and that's not to take anything away from her at all. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't fit my musical tastes. But
that's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's entirely subjective, and it's entirely about taste.
Yeah, and I hate to say stuff like this, but I could imagine if I heard this album and these songs sang by someone like Bonnie Raitt or Susan Tedeschi or someone like that, I would probably this would probably be my favourite album. But I don't know. It just doesn't convey itself to me in a way that it should. Yeah. But that's my taste, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's Norah Jones does entice me more, actually. I mean, I'm probably talking more about Come Away With Me, but I do love her voice, and I really, as Dion has said a few times, I really love her piano playing.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we're all feeling very similar about this album. I think there's some great things about it. Like I'm a bit of a sucker for a whirly. Like I love the electric piano and so that pops up in the morning and things like that. And then I've learned a little bit about the slit drum and there's some obviously Levon Helm plays on. So there was definitely some elements in the album, and I really love a few of the tracks. But yeah, it's a funny one for me because I hadn't heard this album before, and I had based my whole opinion and view on Norah Jones from Come Away With Me. And I know I keep going back to that, but that album does have so much, and
it's significantly, for me, it's significantly better.
Yes, I agree.
I really do think it's like night and day for me. Like Come Away With Me it's a special record, and the commercial success, seconds that, I guess. It really is.
Should we do some ratings then for Feels Like Home?
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
I went first last week, so I'll give it to somebody else.
Mike, do you want to go first?
Okay. All in all, a nice record. Nice is the right word to describe this record, I think. It's nice. Mm-hmm. It's great musicianship, lovely songs, all played well. Just doesn't stand out for me. I'd say I don't have any strong feelings either way for this album, and so I'm going to give it a 5, smack bang in the middle.
Ooh,
cool.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, Johnny.
So it was a new listen for me, and coming from as a fan of Come Away With Me and being brought up with that, with my mum playing it all the time, I was really excited. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, when I first stuck it on last week, I was sat in the garden with my lunch. It was like the perfect setting. I had my salad and the sun was shining, and the first 3 songs came on, and I was like, oh my goodness, we might have just come across an incredible album. And then it started to lose me. There was a couple of songs that were a little dreary for me. I think the musicianship is brilliant, but we're not talking musicianship in terms of Asia. I'm going to give it a 6.
Cool. Yeah, similarly for me, I think I went through the same thing when I chose this album. I was remembering the kind of top heaviness and the first few tunes, and from when I'd listened to it, X amount of years ago. So I thought, yeah, man, let's go for this one. I'm also feeling a little bit underwhelmed by it. What I would say, I always think this sort of music is like, it relies on like a captivating storyteller, and I do think Norah Jones's voice is, I've always loved her voice. It's amazing. And it's a testament what her producer says about her. But what Mike said was really interesting about how if these songs were taken by somebody else, like a Bonnie Raitt or someone, would we like them a bit more? Maybe, I'm not sure. Equally, I feel like if they were taken by someone else who's far less superior to Norah Jones, you wouldn't even give them a second glance. You know what I mean? It's a lot of the album feels a bit like that. So I'm going to go with Johnny, and I'm also going to give it a 6 out of 10. So that's a 5 and 2 6s for Feels Like Home by Norah Jones.
Can I give you a little quote from my mum? Because every week my mum goes, oh, what album are you guys doing? I just checked out this one. I said, oh, we're going to do Norah Jones, Feels Like Home. And she said, oh, I've got to be careful listening to Norah Jones. I said, why? She goes, well, I might fall asleep. And it's not because it's not because she thinks it's boring, but we talk about the mood and what it sets. Yeah, it's so relaxing, and you do get sucked in. I agree. With my mum, I couldn't lie down listening to this.
Okay, cool. So that is our verdict on Feels Like Home by Norah Jones. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Please send us an email with any other bits of info about this album, or if you've got anything else you would like us to talk about, including future albums. And that's about it from us. So thanks again, guys, and see you next time.
Cheerio.
See you later.